Thanks so much for joining me on the Slice of Healthcare podcast. How are you today?
Thanks for inviting me, Jared. I'm good. I'm enjoying the sun.
Yeah, it's I don't know how warm it is near you today, but it's definitely a warm one. You can feel the humidity. I don't necessarily mind it. It's nice. It is summer, right?
We need
Uh,
the vitamin D to fight the COVID. So
Absolutely. It's not like we're getting outside too much though, right? So
it's true.
um,
It's true.
I appreciate it though. It definitely makes you feel better having a nice sunny day.
Yep.
Well, I'm really excited to have you on the podcast to one, learn more about your background, kind of how you got to where you are today, and then dive into DocPanel a little bit more. Started learning about the company a few weeks ago. You and I have talked already, and I know the audience would love to learn more about all the things that you guys are doing, how things work, and kind of what the future looks like heading into the second half of 2020.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Perfect. So I think we should just dive right into it. I'd love if you could tell the audience a little bit more about yourself, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. Well, I have a pretty interesting background off the beaten path my whole life. I grew up in India. My family owns coffee land. They grow coffee for a living. And when I was 14, I told my dad I want to do something on my own. And he said, yeah, you go prove yourself and we'll see how it goes. And so at 19, I started my first company. At 21, I moved to the 21, my early 20s. So about 18 years ago, I moved to the US, started an investment bank. So I built a boutique mergers and acquisitions advisory company. And I was advising healthcare companies, helping them make acquisitions. I did that for 13 or 14 years. But I really didn't fulfill any kind of mission in my life. So I was starting to get frustrated. One of my clients called and said, "Why don't you join us? You know more about our business than us." And I ended up consulting for them, and a 3-month engagement became 3 years. They gave me the opportunity to manage certain parts of the business and to deal with large healthcare providers like HCA and Tenet, as well as payers like United and Cigna and Aetna and so on. And so I got in deep to see what the real problems were in healthcare, and it was incredible how complex it is. Every rock you touched was a $1 billion opportunity, which was fascinating. And at the end of the day, all these inefficiencies led to people not getting the best care. Uh, After a while, I decided I need to take a break. And on the first day that I did take the break, somebody called me and said, "Hey, we have this radiology marketplace idea, and we want to bring together all these best radiologists in America into one single platform." And I said, "Oh, that's interesting." And it touched personal. It tugged at my heartstrings because my father had been misdiagnosed or wrongly staged on a PET CT scan 10 years prior and passed away 18 months later, even though another patient was in the same waiting room with the same exact stage and disease. So there's something went wrong, and the agony of dealing with not knowing what was going on and not knowing what the diagnosis meant sort of made it real for me. And so I decided to not only invest in the company, but also get fully involved on a full-time basis, and it sort of become part of my mission to help uh, patients get the right diagnosis. So that's my personal story of how I got to DocPanel.
It's an interesting path. What was it originally? I haven't asked this too much, but I kind of want to for people that came from another country into the United States. What was it initially that really drew you into wanting to come over here?
Honestly, I did. It wasn't a dream of mine. Oh, I want to go to the US. I mean, I was very happy, upper middle class background in India, so very comfortable. And I think it was just the entrepreneurial journey. I wanted to start a company. The spaces we were looking at were most strong in the US. I came here with $600 in my pocket, lived on my sister's couch, and even though it was the early 2000s, people didn't ask me where I was from or what was my accent or where I went to school. They said, "What can you do for me?" And I, eventually got comfortable with that, and I figured there's so many opportunities. So it's sort of what kept me here is more important than what brought me here. What brought me here was a business trip. What kept me here was the spirit of entrepreneurship, the equality you felt when you went into a meeting. Nobody really cared. And it was all about what can you do. So I've been to 42 states in the country, and I've just loved being an entrepreneur and building connections. There's always somebody to help you. There's always a precedent for it, and there's an ecosystem that promotes it. And I think that's what is awesome. I mean, I think if I didn't do this, I'd do another company, or if I sold this company or exited, I would do another one, because it's a beautiful process of creating something. I think that's keeps you here.
Absolutely. Well, I think based on what you just said, we should lead into diving more. I mean, you gave a little bit about what DocPanel is, but I'd love to hear more about, I guess, the full description, how it works, and we can go from there.
Okay, so DocPanel was an idea on a napkin in the summer of 2016. And the whole concept was we wanted to create a marketplace for specialty radiologists. The hypothesis is that the diagnosis is the starting point of care. And most times, diagnosis starts with a scan, an ultrasound, an X-ray, an MRI, or a CT, and then gets more complicated. And what we found that people's care and well-being were directly impacted by the inability to get the right diagnosis. The inability to get the right diagnosis is caused by a series of fundamental issues in the industry. You have radiologists that read cases, and there's 40,000 of them in the US, and it's hyper specialized. So the person who reads your elbow cannot read a breast mammogram. The person who reads your brain doesn't read your gallbladder or your kidney. And so we have in the US a highly growing fragmentation of specialization. There are 14 specialties, umpteen number of subspecialties. And each specialty is unique and requires a certain focus and dedication. And what we saw was your ability to get that specialist was directly impacted by where you went and got your scan. So I live 2 blocks from NYU, and there's 70 radiologists there doing research. But if I drove 2 miles up to Spanish Harlem, there's 2 radiologists reading everything. And so the quality of diagnosis changes based on your care setting and on a whole host of factors. So what we said is, let's bring together specialists. Every radiologist on DocPanel is fellowship trained. Let's bring together current and former academics who have a lifetime of work in a special area, and then let's make them available to whoever needs them. So that was the fundamental hypothesis of what we decided to do. And the reason it's called DocPanel is you can create your own panel of specialists when you need it. And then you can expand from the diagnosis to the care. So phase 1 was creating the network of radiologists. Today we have 400 radiologists around the country. So we went live at the end of 17, early 18. And in a relatively short span of time, we can cover any type of case in any specialty in any state in America. That's how big the network is. And we've found the leading experts in every area, every disease that you can access easily.
Interesting. I like the name too. I always like when the names make sense. I remember we were going through a naming process on the Block Health side of things. Some of the initial names were absolutely ridiculous, right? We're looking at Greek mythology, like what everyone kind of does, and it's always nice when the name makes sense and works well with your business.
The name of DocPanel actually wasn't the original name. We changed the name a year in, and it was funny. The old name didn't make sense. It wasn't connecting. So we looked around. We found an agency that went through a naming process, which, by the way, if you haven't worked with a branding agency, it's just one of the most amazing processes, because they ask you these abstract questions that takes you 2 days to just figure out what the question is. But then they gave us all these names, and DocPanel sort of just made sense. And it scored 78% positive rating when we did the survey of likability, relatability, and all that.
Interesting. That's cool. Yeah, I haven't engaged with a branding firm yet. We did, for our logo, we did a contest where we put it out, and then all these graphic designers created a logo for us based on our spec, and then people voted on it, and that was the one we selected. So we've gone through that type of process, but that's interesting. We'll have to check that out at some point, especially for individual offerings. That's something we've been looking at now, right? What are you going to name this certain product type underneath the overall company?
Yeah. I mean, if you think about what we are doing, right, we are providing peace of mind to different audiences, whether it's a patient who's getting a second opinion or a medical practice who doesn't have a radiologist of that specialty. We're offering peace of mind. So regardless of what brand we selected, we still had to build identity around the brand. of credibility, of knowledge, or whatever. So it was not just the name; it was kind of the overall persona of the company that we had to create from scratch,
Yeah.
which has been interesting. It's actually been a really good journey.
What did things look like, I guess, before you, like when we last talked, you were telling me about how things have been super busy lately,
Yeah.
and in talks with a lot of people. Um, can you kind of give us the viewpoint? Obviously, things changed due to COVID. Um, what what has changed in the sense that like your focus, like you said you're busy. What have you been really busy on? Is it building these relationships?
So we went through a bit of a hyper growth phase from commercial live in March of 18 to January of 2020. We launched two lines of business, a B2C business and a B2B business. B2B is all hospitals, imaging centers, medical practices. The B2B side just caught on fire, and we ended up going from 0 to 115 customers in under 18 months. We were just we were just onboarding clients, left and right. And then it became more about managing the clients, making sure that they got the right radiologists they needed for their cases, and IT connectivity and security. And I think we clocked 700% CAGR in the first 3 years. So it's just nuts. On the B2C side, we launched not just in the US, but globally. And we had patients from 35 countries getting second opinions. So ours was all about managing growth and creating hyper verticals within healthcare. So pre-COVID, we were, rocket ship. And the growth looked like it was going to continue. But what COVID did was people are not going to the hospital. They're not going to the doctor. They're not going to get a elective procedure or a scan. So there's an artificial depression in terms of the current volume. But what COVID did was it opened up the possibility for these practices to say, why do we need a $500,000 a year radiologist that's sitting in the office? We can have 5 or 6 to supplement my staff internally. So let the staff the existing radiologists do what they're doing, but then let's get all these specialty radiologists on demand. And so we actually saw a huge influx in demand in the last 3 months. The other thing that we've been doing is we've been focusing on really complicated types of cases. So everybody thinks of radiology as an MRI or a CAT scan, but there are much more complex things that happen. And so we've been increasing our capability in oncology, in degenerative brain disease, in cancer detection, in all kinds of areas that we didn't have the time to do before. So we've been launching very highly specialized sort of offerings, and that's leading to even more demand, which has been interesting. People, I think, have taken the time to really listen to interesting and creative solutions. So we got an audience for a lot of that. So the inbound interest has been high for us.
Interesting. Cool. Yeah, no, I can see that. What I've noticed the most about COVID is it's gotten these large health systems and even smaller healthcare organizations to start thinking about their costs much differently. Like where they might have not outsourced something before, they're starting to look at it, right? So it seems like that's been something that's also that will positively impact your business moving forward.
Yeah. I mean, we're just a platform that takes the specialists and connects them to the practice, and then creates the clinical workflow in the middle to make it all happen. So, the idea that they can do it, sort of just a lot of people we were talking to a year ago, 2 years ago, called us back. And they're like, oh, now it makes sense. Yeah. So it's been fun. It's been fun. We also spent a lot of time on growing the team, changing out skill sets, a lot of clinical resources. So that's added a different flavor as well.
What's next heading into the second half of 2020?
Second half of 2020 is basically we are integrating a lot of artificial intelligence into the platform. So we can now take our scans and send them to a software that detects whether you're likely to have MS. We can send it to breast imaging software that can see if you have cancer or suspicious findings. We are automating workflow internally, and then we are launching a whole host of services around advanced capabilities. We're also in the process of expanding some of the capability we have, where it's not just a report that you get from a radiologist, but also a face-to-face consult. So there's a whole tele platform that's being integrated. So that's what's coming up. So we've been doing a lot of that. I think the second half of the year, we have, I think, 20 customers going live next month, which is going to be insane. But it's I think it's managing growth, managing the volatility. Right now, there is no predictability. It's highly volatile. Um, some parts of the country are busy, some are not. So it's I think that's the challenge right now, is the volatility.
Interesting. Well, I'm looking forward to staying in touch with you, following DocPanel as you guys continue to grow and launch these new offerings. I'm very excited for the future. Thank you again for joining me on the Slice of Healthcare podcast. It's been a pleasure, and best of luck with everything moving forward.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to continuing our chats about other areas of interest we have in common.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Thank you.